Hello everyone, and welcome back to another glorious session. My name is Icarus, and this git here is Kunagusis. Kunagusis, how are you doing, you fine git?
Okay, whatever. Hi, what's it? Yes, I'm Kunagusis. Welcome back. Funny thing, this is basically our second take on this particular video.
Yes, because of a cock up on my end, basically I added in the wrong battle replay.
We'll get to that. We will get to it and point out.
That's just a little teaser of what's to come. Let's just say.
Yes, we only copped it when we were doing the next video. Was when we copped it, and rather I copped it, and went something ain't right here. And then we dissected it. I'm sure it was very painful for him, but we figured out the problem.
Went through the process of elimination.
And it's all good.
Yes, for now anyways.
So, we are building a sacred grove at Harmoisia because we want that public order.
Your public order has never gone wrong for us now.
Yes.
So.
You're recruiting mercenary Indian elephants, and you're proceeding to hit the spears of arrows toward a Marian army. The heroes among men are called.
That's a very
Tis a
that's
small,
a very that's all I can think of.
It's a small
very
army.
very
I can look into the auto-resolve,
but no, you decide to go through with the battle because
yes.
Why not?
Yeah, why not? Their general, an experienced one, has a chariot bodyguard.
A chariot bodyguard, ye gods.
Yeah, not too many factions have chariot bodyguards.
Really, not that many.
Well, there's a few. I'm trying to think.
Like who?
The Iweriu have it. That's the Irish. I think the Iceni have it. They're Britons, and I think the Nervi. Maybe the Nervi. I don't know if the Nervi have it. I know they have chariots. And then the Marians have chariots for their bodyguards, and that's it as far as I recall, at least. The thing is, the whole thing is, by this time period, chariots aren't really that important.
They're not that important.
Not really. Not that many societies still use them by this time period. Some do, again, but not so much.
But they're a very
Cavalry.
powerful. They're a very powerful method of onslaught, aren't they?
You're thinking that they're probably in gameplay terms, and even then, they're very situational.
But in real life,
It sort of depends. They were probably useful for, particularly for a time when there wasn't really much cavalry. But so the way chariots, as far as I understand, kind of works. I think there's a broadly Western tradition, if you will, and then there's like a broadly Eastern tradition of sorts regarding chariot warfare. The way in which chariot is used. Western chariots, at least by this time period we're dealing with, it's like a battle platform. It's more for dropping a warrior off and he does his fighting. It can skirmish a bit on the way, but it's more about dropping off the warrior, I think, so we can go and fight. Because again, chariots will be the elites will be having the chariots.
okay.
Not just some normal common rabble. Which they could probably hardly afford a horse. That's why cavalry is often a thing of the elite. In more eastern environments, I think they were broadly functioning more as the weapon itself. That's where you have the scythed chariot of the east. You know, it was in use by the Achaemenid Persians, and then the Seleucids basically just continued the practice to a certain extent. So I guess the platform itself, the vehicle, is a weapon. Because, like, as far as we can tell, I think there's only one rider on the side of the chariot. That's the guy on the reins. Maybe there was another man skirmishing that just can't be represented in the game. the case with the scythe chariot, its job was, it seems, to kind of ram into enemy lines, maybe break them up and do damage. Whereas I think chariots, to a certain extent, in say Britain, which to a certain extent British Isles retained some chariot tradition more so. I think the idea was, to an extent, it was more for dropping warriors off. But as time had progressed, just there was not really much need or point for chariots. Cavalry would just do the job a lot handier, cheaper, I suppose. And horses would have been big and strong enough to be mounted, to be ridden upon. Because the whole point of why you get chariots is that horses at that point aren't big enough and strong enough to handle the weight of an armored soldier.
But that's why you had the elephants do all the hard work, I assume.
Well, in society they may have had elephants. Not every society had elephants.
Oh, I know, but like
again,
for those
Indians,
societies that
but
did
again,
utilize them, it was a much better. I'm assuming it was a much better alternative.
I don't know, because it also depends on how you're able to. It's so messiness. The thing is, I think it's the Indians that are kind of the first to really use war elephants, and then they spread the practice outside, in essence. So it's.
Strange. You think it would have caught on for the regions who were able to have those elephants?
I don't know. It's, the thing is, that's as far as I understand, because war elephants are documented in use by the Indians, and we see this through accounts of Alexander's campaigns. Alexander the Great goes as far as, not exactly India, but near India, within vaguely Indian territories. And this is where the Greeks are coming up against this thing called war elephants. This is probably the first time they even come across elephants, period. Well, maybe not exactly, but by and large at least. And then as the successor kingdoms are clashing and trying to use different weapons of war to one-up each other, and war elephants are one of those, particularly the Seleucids were fond of using them. As far as I understand, this practice begins to spread to other regions. So Carthage begins to kind of adopt war elephants, in part because I think they're aware of the practice being used by others, and as far as I've heard, although I would need to vet this to some extent, apparently at least some mahouts might have been Indian, or at least even the term referring to mahouts kind of was referring to them as Indians. Again, even just as a pseudo-ethnic label, because I've talked before about how sometimes there are these sort of pseudo-ethnic military groups. They're named after an ethnic group, you might say, but they're not actually members of that ethnic group. They just fight in a style reminiscent to that group, like Tarentines or Cretans.
It seems a bit confusing though. What if someone ends up mistaking them for like the soldiers who are from that region who perform that actual action? Do you know what I mean? Like, don't you think it could be confusing down the line?
It could be, but that's just the way it seems to be. That's just the way the terms worked. So when you're talking about references to Cretans, specifically, especially in like Hellenistic armies, in this regiment of Cretans, they were probably not actually Cretans. Maybe they were Cretans, Cretan mercenaries, but they could have also been just people fighting the Cretan style. This is part of the whole debate of Cretans versus Neo-Cretans, because no one knows what Neo-Cretans are. We just know there was mentions of a group called Neo-Cretans, Neo-Cretoi.
It's a bit suspicious though, because like, how can you know that there were Neo-Cretans around when there's like hardly any evidence of what they were up to?
Because I think that's the term in accounts. I think even maybe it was at the Battle of Raphia, maybe Neo-Cretans are mentioned, but we don't know. Their role is not clearly described.
I don't know, it just sounds a bit suspicious to me.
Well,
I don't
think
know.
like this, you're talking to people who probably are writing to an audience that like understand these things, so they don't really think much of it.
Maybe not, but all the
I
same.
guess the point is, I suppose, that sometimes ancient authors, they're not writing for people like us. They're writing for people of their place and time who likely understand these things as a given.
Of course, yeah.
So they're probably not going to think much about how to define a Neo-Cretan. They just go, oh yeah, Neo-Cretans.
At your command.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm sure there would have been like a few bits of misconception or deception during those times as well, especially if it was for the audience at the time. You know, I think that's also something that you have to keep in mind as well. Now, I could be wrong. It could very well be just a general lack of information and everything like that. But I don't know. You do have to kind of keep these sorts of variables open in terms of like which path seems most likely, I suppose. But then again, it could go either way.
I think some of the arguments I remember reading about what Neo-Cretans might mean, it could be Cretans that are melee combatants, trained as melee combatants. Maybe they're just pseudo-ethnic. They're not actual Cretans, but they're trained to fight in Cretan style archery. Those are some terms. I think maybe the latter is maybe more likely, I'm not sure. But that's what I remember reading on it at the time, because the Cretans had a distinctive style of archery.
Okay.
You know, they used composite bows, a lot like Easterners did, but they had kind of pretty heavy arrows, which meant they didn't have great range in a sense, but could pack probably a pretty heavy punch. And that's why in DEI Cretan archers don't have a great range.
Because they're heavy ass bows, basically.
Heavy arrows.
Or heavy arrows, whatever. The point is
they have high damage.
They just don't have an awful lot of range on them. That's the downside.
Yeah. But you know, that's. I think DEI probably goes with the idea of Neo-Cretans being Cretans, non-Cretans, maybe in a Cretan style. I think it's DEI's
Hermes would
interpretation.
surely bless you if trade between our peoples was allowed.
But our satrap Sardes wants a trade agreement and are willing to pay us. So we agree.
Perhaps
I hope it's a hefty bargain.
Well, we can't hurt for getting a good bit of trade
mighty
revenue.
people, well versed
And
in
they're
the
paying
uses
us
of
for
wealth
it.
and power.
Trade dissolved the D.O.N.G, because the faction is unable to trade with us.
Well, that's a shame, isn't it?
Well,
That's a
probably
shame,
they
innit?
lost their settlement that gave access to that trade route. Possibly even, that they lost that, or else even the faction's gone. So we can't trade with the faction that doesn't exist. The D.O.N.G are Illyrians. Yeah, I think they're Illyrians.
So I've been hearing some rumblings that this guy at Creative Assembly, he sent out this sort of like testimony that was talking about like
Yeah, so
like a misperception of who's to blame for all the sorts of technical.
Let's scale it back here. Scale it back. So it was maybe a couple of weeks ago, and as of this recording, of course, so it's best to always make that reference because it'll probably be much later by the time this video gets out. But I think Julian McKinley was his name. He was a developer for Creative Assembly around the time of Rome 2. And he, as of a few weeks as of this recording, in early July, he penned an article, I suppose in essence explaining a lot of the problems as he saw it with the development of Rome 2. Part of this was kind of, I suppose, to vindicate himself from the fact that he got kind of thrown under the bus for the failings of the game.
So how exactly was he thrown under the bus?
I don't know all the ins and outs, because it's gone by memory. even though I did skim it the last time we did a recording session. But the gist was he was, I think, he was a programmer, particularly for, I think, the battle AI, and that is an important area where the game fell down. But also he did an interview maybe some weeks or months prior to the game's release, kind of hyping up the game with all the promises about how good the battle AI is going to be and all that sort of stuff. And I think therefore, because he was a public face of it, people kind of lashed at him. And in addition to that, I think it was also, I suppose it just became kind of convenient of sorts. The Creative Assembly just kind of let it happen of sorts, that he'd be somewhat scapegoated.
I mean, like,
the blame he more or less says was communication problems, particularly between departments, design needs, just being so caught up in trying to come up with different ideas and not always giving enough room to properly implement these ideas. Kind of management deciding that it's good enough and rushing it out, and kind of citing more of the design needs, and just a multitude of problems like that. And the usual kind of cost-saving, corner-cutting measures, stuff along those rough lines. It was an ambitious game that was hindered, I suppose, by troubled development and misplaced priorities.
that kind of sounds like a recurring problem at CEA to begin with. Like, they always have, as far as I'm aware, they always seem to have like these sorts of grand plans for the designs of their games, and yet somehow they always end up either having to delay the release, or they have to release a new update in the middle of their release, and it doesn't seem to have gone any better in the years following Rome 2's release, especially with later games, as far as I'm aware.
I suppose in a sense, like Warhammer 3, which is, you know, that was released in a rough state because of rushed out too soon. Even after a delay, that game was rushed out because they wanted to get it out, particularly by this nice market period. Now it wasn't
imagine
as like disastrous like Rome 2 in a sense. The issue lay more in that for a game, for a series so built upon sandbox, the big sandbox campaign that everybody was wanting for Warhammer 3, Immortal Empires, because Warhammer 1 was a largely sandbox campaign. Warhammer 2 had a narrative campaign called the Vortex campaign, but it had shortly after that the sandbox Mortal Empires, which merged the maps of Warhammers 1 and 2.
And I can only imagine
And
the
so-
crunch situations
And
that are going
Warhammer
down over there, especially
3 was meant to be even bigger than that by merging 1, 2, and 3. And that's where we were going to get what was called Immortal Empires, but that didn't come out till like 6 months after the game's release. And people got quickly fed up with the narrative Realm of Souls campaign because it was very repetitive and all that stuff.
nothing changed. Basically, nothing ever changed.
And excuse me. So, and we got Immortal Empires and Grand, but there've been a lot of bugs and a lot of issues.
As typical as it usually is with these
Again,
kinds of
not
releases.
as bad as like Rome 2, and not so game breaking, but still kind of issues.
But they're still there, you know, like
Yeah.
it's not exactly an
And
improvement, you could
There
say.
was some progress made, some promise. They released, with Immortal Empires came Champions of Chaos, which was great. That was a good DLC with a good rework to the Warriors of Chaos, who really needed it. Then they had a brace pack, the Chaos Dwarfs, which was great. That had some controversy for being 25 quid, 25 euros, 20 pounds. and that would come with 3 legendary lords and a legendary hero. However, most people were fairly, oh, this is fine, this is fine.
My king is willing to lay down the sword. It is not
Through
often
hus
that he is
teeth and
moved
hus
to mercy.
tongues, let's just say, but yeah.
Like in general, this is okay, fair enough. This is probably worth it. Just park that matter. Here we have the issue at hand.
Yes, do tell Kunagusis.
Okay, so let's just. So we mentioned before about a cock up on Icarus' end.
As
Here's what
usual
happened.
with me.
If you were perceptive enough, maybe you'd notice. Well, you notice we've been besieging Pura, the capital of the Marians, for a while with this army. But you see, what happened was originally I went to fight the siege battle. You may see at one point I was checking out them pre-siege and deciding whether I would fight the battle. Well, I did. However, in the middle of that battle, the game crashed. So I decided to make things easier and all that, I would just wait till they sallied out, which is what we're having happen here. However, Icarus got a bit confused at what happened, and what he did was he showed me getting ready to fight the siege battle, but then used the replay footage we have here to demonstrate it. And then what would happen is, and we probably see this in, I'd say, the next session, because we caught on to this when we were doing the next session. But essentially that meant was he showed, but when showing the sally that is happening now, he used the next replay. And that meant every replay, it seems, on the next session was one replay ahead. Because he preemptively used this replay.
It's really a fault on both of our ends, honestly.
Yeah, I should have caught on to it when we were doing this particular session, but I didn't notice anything, and then I thought things were suspicious as we were like
And I should
halfway
have,
through
like,
the next session.
And I should have triple checked the replay against the actual location of where it was taking place, so I'm just as much to blame on my end. So
It's just a simple little error. The first of this kind of error we've had. Most of the errors have been other problems, like deleting an entire video that didn't need to be deleted a few
Yes.
times.
yes, indeed.
Like I think even at the beginning of this series, you deleted the second video, I think.
But we don't need to rehash those details. What do you think?
Well, it's kind of fun to bring it up, but anyways.
Anyway, what's going on in this actual battle right now?
So, well, it's a sally. So it's the garrison of the settlement combined with a small portion, with a very small army inside it. The general's on his chariot, so basically we have our phalanx, we have our elephants, all that good stuff. Their garrison isn't too strong. It's mostly, I think, their townsfolk, which are weak as hell. Their spearmen, governor's guard, and something like that, which are fairly solid. And I think they have some skirmish cav. And then they may have slingers or archers or something.
So you mentioned that the chariots, both in the game and in real life, they didn't always work out the way, or they weren't as powerful as everyone was hoping for. But why would the general still ride those chariots if they weren't that?
Status.
What?
Status. A reflection of status.
Yeah, but it's a bit pointless, because if the chariots were kind of useless, then what's the
Well,
point
not
of?
that they were useless, just they're probably not as great and useful. There's probably a lot more situational.
Yeah,
At the
but
end
like
of the day,
it seems a
people
bit
like to show
stupid.
off their status.
It
There's
kind
probably
of
not a
seems a
whole
bit
lot of
stupid.
utility in having nice fancy decorations on your armor, but it still shows off your status.
It seems a bit stupid to show off your status on something that doesn't exactly do an awful lot of damage to begin with, you know?
It's just the way it works. Humans like to showcase their status.
I know,
You
I
like to
know,
show
I
how
get that,
important you are.
but all the same, it just seems kind of stupid
Even on
and
the
pointless in my
battlefield.
opinion. I mean, there's got to be a better way to show off their status than running a useless, well, not useless, but like weak chariots to begin with. Surely there would have been a better way. Hoping
Well,
I'm not saying there
you're
probably was,
issuing
but surely there
orders.
must have been an alternative, more efficient way to show off the general status. I'm
You know,
thinking.
it really depends. That's the thing. It's ultimately down to one's own personal preference and how warfare work in your society. These aren't exactly so black and white.
I guess.
But at the end of the day, there's always going to be an element of non-practical things being used to show off one's status. Fancy decorations on your armor, even fancy looking armor, even if it isn't all that much more practical than plain straightforward stuff.
Yeah.
Face
yeah,
masks.
I guess.
Face masks are, let's say, maybe iffy. They probably have some practical benefit, but they are also causing a hindrance in other ways.
Maybe. I don't know. I guess it's just a matter of perspective.
That's the thing. So, riding around in a chariot is probably a way of displaying your status. Yeah. And again, probably reflects cultural values and stuff like that. And they still probably had some usage, but again, generals are probably less likely actually fighting and more going around issuing orders. Because it's probably a bit too risky. You know?
Yeah, I guess.
But anyways, we were on a discussion about Warhammer 3.
Yes, let's circle back to
We've
that.
talked about this before. Chaos Dwarfs, grand. Next DLC was called Shadows of Change. Shadows of Change affected 3 factions: Tzeentch, Kislev, and Grand Cathay. And basically, it was kind of a disaster. The content was kind of wanting. Not enough content for the price, which is about €25. The reworks that were free were rather lackluster. So like, we got something like about 3 units maybe per faction, 3 legendary lords, 1 legendary hero, 1 free legendary hero, and 1 generic lord, 1 generic hero across every faction. Like, that's it. So now they rectified some of that in an update a few months later, where we got 2 new legendary heroes, 1 for each race. We got generic lords and heroes across every race. So, and we got up to about 5 to 6 units per race. But they didn't really provide any major reworks to the race. So, yeah. But Thrones of Decay came out, and that has proven a very successful and worked out well. Same price range, a little cheaper. Sold in like bundles. So yeah, but we got that affected Nurgle, the Empire, and the Dwarfs. They all got nice reworks. New legendary lords, legendary heroes, generic lords and heroes. All sorts of good stuff we got from that. And with some promise with the next DLC, that's corn, green skins, and ogres. And the ogres are seen as needing a rework. They were released with the launch of Warhammer 3 and not in a great state. So many think this will finish off the ogres, and with a good rework, great. So yeah. But that's the thing, Warhammer 3's had a bit of a messy launch. No one knows for sure how long it's going to last. There were some leaks by Legendary Total War that seem to be proven false for the most part, but they caused a
They've
lot
caught
of
the
concern.
attention of most people regardless.
Yes, he's one of the biggest Total War YouTubers out there. He's also been blacklisted by CA a couple of times.
Is he a reliable source?
I think he just says he's taking whatever information is given to him. So these are like probably CA devs or former CA devs giving him this information. Whether or not it's true, he doesn't know. But he takes it, this is given to him in good faith. And so he is giving it, so he is, I suppose, in that way, in good faith, relaying this to the community so they know.
Yeah, I suppose.
And yeah, because someone was talking about how Thrones of the Decay style DLC were very expensive and that it didn't sell enough to potentially support doing that format again. Some of the rumors were saying, the leaks were saying, and the game probably has a couple of years left. Maybe there's only a couple of DLC left.
But this is just speculation we're talking about.
Yeah,
it's
no
not
one
confirmed
knows.
fact.
Though a video did come out from Creative Assembly. It had a few developers talking, explaining what's roughly in line with the future.
So it's kind of only adding fuel to the fire, is it?
No, they at least clarified things, communicated pretty well. People are happy with this. Basically saying, you know, next DLC, which is probably coming towards the end of the year, is Khorne, Ogres, Greenskins. We know what we're going to expect for Legendary Lords. A rough idea of some of what we might get in terms of units and stuff, but not a lot of info in that regard. Slaanesh will be done. They did promise Slaanesh fans that Slaanesh, because originally Slaanesh was going to be the next DLC, but they did assure Slaanesh fans Slaanesh will get their DLC. They also plan to do in between beta patches. They plan to do more faction reworks.
If I'm being honest, that sounds more like damage control than like an actual announcement, honestly.
Well, again, it depends how you look at it. It was a video of the 3 developers explaining roughly the future for the game, and the game isn't going anywhere soon.
Well, obviously with their track record these days, but go ahead anyway.
Again, these are the developers who probably are earnest, senior developers, Rich Aldridge and all that, but I know
I don't doubt they're...
Sophia is getting involved, and they're one of the solid studios.
I won't question their intentions, absolutely not, but just like given the track record at CEA, it's kind of hard not to take it with a pinch of salt,
Well,
I
yeah, I suppose
suppose.
we'd have to, but at least we know that's what these senior developers are telling us, and these are senior dudes.
Like, I don't doubt they'll definitely try to deliver on those intentions, but just with the track record they have, I wouldn't be surprised if like it came with a few hitches or if it came with a few extra delays down the line anyway.
Maybe. Well, we already know that the next DLC is not coming for like another several months. But anyways, we don't have time to delve on this. We are finished with this video.
Yes,
Hope you enjoyed
we are.
watching. Thanks for watching.
Be sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you all very soon.
Indeed, cheers.